The Detroit Lions and Jacksonville Jaguars squared off in their first joint practice this week, and I'm here to tell you why it's not as bad as you might have heard. What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit training camp observation video. I'm Miko, and once again, we are back to do another video of breaking down the latest news, observations, and takeaways to come out of Lions training camp today. Now, from what you've probably heard about the Lions training camp today, it may not have been their best day. And some of that is very much true, but there are some underlining factors that actually contributed to the Lions possibly not having their best day offensively. And I'm still going to tell you why they actually ended up having some success on the offensive end of the football and still found ways to find success on the defensive end as well. But first and foremost, we got to start with the biggest news to come out of today's training camp practice, and that's the injuries to both Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Now, each is going to be dealing with a different injury. For Amon-Ra St. Brown, it seems to be an ankle injury that he did try to at least work out and try to get just taped up and to help him get back on the field. But at the end of the day, the training staff chose to hold him out. Now, Jameson Williams is a different story. While the Lions were running their 7-on-7 drills, JMO kind of came up grabbing at his hamstring, and it's kind of safe to say for someone that is looking to get a lot of reps this preseason, this is not a good thing for him. Now, it's a little too early to speculate exactly how severe the injury is for both wide receivers, but considering how big of a role both of these players are going to play for the Lions once the regular season gets kicked off, I wouldn't be overly surprised if the Lions took the cautious approach and tried to keep these two guys out of the next few practices just to give them ample time to recover and be ready for the regular season. This is more of a concern for Amon-Ra, seeing as, he will be available for week one, and not so much for JMO, as obviously he will have his suspension. So if he needs to sit out and take some time to get healed up, it's not the end of the world. The only thing that he's going to be missing out on are those reps that we talked about as far as the preseason is concerned, and the work that the Lions were really looking forward to getting him so that by the time he came back in week 7, he would be up to speed. If this injury is one that tends to linger and keeps JMO out of consecutive practices, then yeah, there might be a little bit of panic just on the simple fact that, again, he's going to be missing out on valuable work that he could have utilized before he went into his suspension. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown not being available for the first team offense seems to also have had a trickle down effect to Jared Goff. Going into this offseason, we've heard about how amazing the connection between St. Brown and Goff has been. And now that he wasn't available, Goff was going to have to find other options and other weapons to kind of lean upon throughout today's practice against the Jags. And he definitely struggled with some of his throws and just didn't have the same consistency that a lot of spectators had been used to seeing from him. And in terms of actually like turning the ball over, he actually had one really bad turnover to Devin Lloyd, as well as a would-be interception that also would have went to Devin Lloyd had he been able to secure the pass. Some are coming out of this practice basically saying that this was Jared Goff's worst practice on the day. And again, without his number one wide receiver, I can see why people would think that. And especially with the way it sounds like this practice was ran, there wasn't a lot of deep shots. There wasn't a lot of, gutsy plays in that regard. And the Lions played it fairly conservative, taking a lot of shorter passes on the day. With that said, I'm still not going to be overly concerned with Jared's performance, considering the fact that, listen, the Lions know what they have in him and they know what he can and can't do well. And this matchup against the Jags is something that is actually going to benefit him greatly, as the Jaguars tout a slightly more athletic defense than what the Lions dealt with last week in the Giants. When you look at those linebackers, when you look at Devin Lloyd, when you look at their defensive ends, you look at Josh Allen, as well as some of the secondary players, this is the type of defense that the Lions is going to have to prepare for when you have athletes and that can actually close in quickly on those short, quicker routes. So, yes, the Jags definitely seem to have Goff's number at times on the day, but it wasn't all bad in that regard. In fact, with the Lions not having two of their better wide receivers available to them in terms of the passing game, it gave the running game a really good stage to actually shine, and they seemed to take full advantage of that. Both Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery had some very impressive runs, and the offensive line with the return of Frank Ragnow has looked a lot better in terms of opening up rushing lanes for both of these backs. At one point in time during a red zone drill, in fact, Taylor Decker and Jonah Jackson both combined for some really good impressive blocks that opened up a 10-yard touchdown run for Jameer Gibbs. Now, I know that's only one play, but that's the type of success that this Lions offense is going to need to help fuel their pass game. Even if they're missing pieces on the outside, whether that be an Amon-Ra St. Brown or a Jameson Williams, the Lions still lean very heavily on their running backs. And trust me, I know that hearing about a running game just finding success and being able to open up rushing lanes isn't the sexiest thing to come out of camp, but it's what this team is going to need if they're going to be looking to win games once the regular season starts. Now, earlier when talking about Jared Goff, I did say that the day was a bit of a mixed bag for him. He definitely had his struggles where he wasn't hitting certain passes, and we talked about his interception and his would-be interception. But he did still find success. And when he did find success, it came by way of Kalif Raymond. Now, Kalif is a wide receiver that the Lions have had around for the last few years. And if you're one of the national media, or if you're just a fan that's not super tuned in, you probably don't think about Kalif Raymond very often. Well, on today, Kalif gave a lot of people plenty of reasons to talk about him as he stepped up when Amon-Ra went down and found plenty of success. In fact, at one point in time, Kalif lined up, ran a crossing route, got the pass, and took it another 30 yards. These are the types of things that most of us are used to seeing Amon-Ra St. Brown doing. But if there's ever a time when the Lions need to have some flexibility, if there's a situation like today where Amon-Ra is not available, it's really reassuring to know that you have a Kalif Raymond. And like I said, it's not something that a lot of people talk about. And Kalif's not the biggest name as far as wide receivers in the league, but he's someone who's been fairly consistent for this Lions offense, being their second leading receiver last year. But Kalif wasn't the only wide receiver that was finding success today. Another wide receiver that we've talked about more consistently throughout training camp observations is Dylan Drummond. And Dylan Drummond is continuing to do things that are very similar to how we talk about Brian Branch, in that he is just finding ways to make plays and to catch both the media and the coaching staff's attention in the way that he goes about doing his business. In fact, you could almost argue that Dylan Drummond had the catch of the day when running a crossing route and basically making a diving catch from a Teddy Bridgewater pass. These are the type of high effort plays that Drummond is going to have to continue to make as he continues to pursue that wide receiver five spot. And at this point, much like I took that leap in saying that, like, yo, Brian Branch to be starting, I think we all have to acknowledge at this point that Dylan Drummond is probably leading the pack in that wide receivers five spot. With the likes of Denzel Mims and Trinity Benson and even Maurice Alexander dealing with injuries and not being available to go out there and compete, Drummond is taking full advantage of these opportunities. And now that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams are both dealing with injuries, you can bet that Drummond is going to continue to get even more opportunities with both the second team and the first team as they continue to give him opportunities throughout training camp. Now, I know so far we've talked exclusively about the offense today, but the defense had their moments as well too. And again, based off of what you've read or where you've been getting your information, you could have come into this video assuming that, like, I'm going to just talk about how poorly the defense played. And don't get me wrong, the defense definitely gave up their fair share of big plays. One specific one being on a 50-yard touchdown to Calvin Ridley, where there seems to have been some sort of miscommunication between Jerry Jacobs and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And while plays like that are going to make the rounds in the media, it doesn't tell the full story of how this defense performed. One of the bigger observations to come out of today's practice is just the overall impact that CJ Gardner-Johnson just has on this defense. His energy is something that we've talked about throughout training camp and just how infectious it is. And it's to the point where, listen, this defense still has to line up week one against the Chiefs, and we're going to have to see how they actually play once it's a full go in these real live game situations. But just in the manner in which Chauncey Gardner-Johnson carries himself on the field makes me believe that this defense is going to be different. I don't know if they're going to be drastically different as far as a performance standpoint, but as an attitude and energy perspective, I expect this defense to look drastically different than what they did last year. CJ GJ had a couple plays in today's practice where it just kind of felt like he was going at a different speed and a different intensity than anyone else on the Jaguar sideline, having two big hits where he essentially just forced fumbles. And one of those hits being so bad that people are saying that he had to step off the field to get his helmet fixed because he broke something. Listen, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this and make it seem like the defense had a much better day. I'm more so just saying that when looking at this defense, there are still positive things to come away from it, even when they're struggling in certain situations throughout practice, whether that be red zone drills or giving up a deep touchdown here or there. This defense absolutely has the pieces and a leader in place that makes me believe that, hey, once the regular season rolls around, they're going to be better than they were a season ago. From now until then, though, yes, they have to clean up the small details. They have to clean up the communication. They have to be able to make plays in the red zone, even though that favors the offense to be able to score. They are still going to have to find situations where they are able to rise to the occasion. Because guess what? When the regular season rolls around, you're going to find yourself in those situations, and you can't give up six there either. Now, one more final update that I want to give before I get out of here is once again on the defensive side and highlighting Jack Campbell. Now, we haven't talked about Jack a ton since the most recent preseason game, but on the day, Jax was once again fairly impressive. Now, he's still splitting reps between the first team and the second team, but when it comes to Jack being able to showcase his ability in the run game, which is something that a lot of Lions fans are concerned about when it comes to this defense, is how vastly improved they're going to be in that aspect. Jack seems to be excelling very well, getting a few different run stops in the day and just showing the ability to understand where he needs to be. And if you've been a Lions fan for any amount of time, a linebacker knowing where he's supposed to be and getting there and still making the play is something that is almost an anomaly at this point because we've seen the Lions go down this road so many times of trying to acquire linebackers and they not quite be where we expect them to be when it comes down to understanding assignments. Well, at this point in the offseason, Jack is proving to be counter to everything that we've ever expected. And he's showing exactly why Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes thought so highly of him that they had to take him in the first round. So, all in all, did the Lions have the greatest day in practice against the Jacksonville Jaguars? Probably not. It's probably not one where they're going to feel great about it when they go through the film. But much like last week when the Giants probably didn't have their best day in their first joint practice, the Lions get an opportunity tomorrow to come back on this field and execute at a higher level, to bring more intensity, to bring the fight to the Jags and see if they can improve on the things that they didn't do well today. And when it comes to injuries, by tomorrow, hopefully we have positive news and that both guys are not going to be out for an extended amount of time. But with that said, thank you guys for checking out another Pride of Detroit training camp observation. If there's any questions you have or any other takeaways that you have from today's practice, be sure to leave us a comment below. And if you're looking for any more insight or additional information on today's practice, be sure to head over to prideofdetroit.com or check out wherever you get your podcast from, as there's a new episode of Jeremy and Eric's post training camp observation podcast, which is a mouthful, available anywhere that podcasts are found. And last but not least, if you're new to this channel, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified anytime we upload a brand new video to this channel. Once again, everybody, I'm Miko here at Pride of Detroit. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.